I do sometimes look at the translations on. This is one thing I do use Safari up for because uh, for two reasons. The main reason is Safari uh, is downloaded on my phone, so I don't need internet access to use it.
So I've got it
That's
on
a,
my phone.
right. So that's a very big advantage. And the other thing is that they have four English translations, at least on Yeshayahu. They have four different English translations. And then they have other translations that are not as useful to me, like German and French and Esperanto and
So
stuff
there's
like that.
a good friend of mine, Jessica Sachs, did the translation of Yeshayahu for the new Koran Tanakh, which I think is
Uh-huh.
probably, going to be, the definitive English language translation. I say my sort of inexpert opinion, but she went she's both a poet in her own right and really knows her sources and really knows them
Hmm.
before.
I think
Um,
that might be one of
and
them. Yeah.
it's not. I don't think that. So the new Koran Torah Tanakh is not on Safari yet. Um,
Yeah, it
it's
could be.
actually
I'm not,
worth getting. It's actually worth getting. So I think that there's an older Koran translation, which I think was which is on Safari, but the new one only came out like last year, the year before that. Even in print.
see what they say. Yeah, I think yeah, you're right. I think you're right. But interesting. I don't know, I think yeah. I think that's a tough thing to do to make a translation. The Al HaTorah website for Torah, that the translation is done by, oh, now I can't remember her name offhand. She's actually the wife of the person who runs the website.
Mm.
If you ever look at it, it's heavily footnoted, so it's very useful as a
Oh, that's very.
translation. Yeah, she'll go into a lot of detail about different opinions about how to translate particular words and phrases. So it's not a running, there is a running translation, but it's heavily footnoted. When I did, I may have told you, I wrote a translation in my youth to Kohelet,
Mm.
and which I know,
Which is interesting. Which is an interesting book to translate in one's youth. Um,
yeah, I was very attracted to it in my youth, and I'm still very attracted to it. But the way I translated it was purposely. Um, I purposely did not try to make it a smooth translation. I tried to translate it in such a way that it would be more of an aid to someone who's reading the Hebrew, like a supplement to the Hebrew. I've been thinking about that in terms of now also of the Gemara, which we should get to. I'm pretty sure I have this idea now that I can't remember. I think Michael Schwartz said he's not coming this week.
okay,
So
I think he's in transit this week. He's traveling
something
somewhere.
like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we should get to that.
And
When
then
I do the sheets,
Paul shows up. Paul will show up when he shows up.
right, which which could be any moment or who knows. But when phew, when I was in yeshiva, there was that what they did because a lot of the I came to yeshiva in knowing very almost nothing, but I was more advanced than a lot of the other students because I had some basic Hebrew. So
Mm.
they used to have a preparation shear for the shear. Oh, here's Paul.
Oh,
I
I
had
don't
a
know.
preparation shear for the shear. That was the shear in Mishnah. And the preparation for this year was just to translate difficult words. And I've been thinking about doing something like that on the sheets, just to translate difficult words, but I haven't bothered to do anything about it because online you can get the Steinsaltz translation in English and Hebrew.
Which is what
And
I was looking at actually when preparing, which I've got mixed feelings about doing, but there's
no, and I think I encouraged you to do that because you don't have um, look, you don't have a preparation shear that to go to, so you have to do it. I pushed you to do it yourself. The way I learned when I was in yeshiva, which I may have said, which was kind of bare bones. I was learning in the 70s. So back in the 70s, I feel like an old man. This is 50 years ago. So there wasn't Steinsaltz was still being produced. It came it didn't come out all at once. He did it over a period of many years. And there was nothing in English except for the Sonsino translation,
I
which
remember something.
which by the way is an interesting translation with notes, which is now completely free. You can download it from the internet. You can download all the volumes. It's a worthwhile translation to have. And then there was another one that was done like 100 years ago. I think it was in the 20s, back in 1920s. There was a translation of most of the Gemara into English. I don't remember the name of the person who did it, but a little searching it's also something you can find. I didn't use that because back then we didn't have internet. And I also didn't have easy access to the Sonsino, but it was interesting because by the time I was in yeshiva, I think the Sonsino translation had gone out of copyright, and so another company started producing volumes of it side by side with the Gemara. Originally, when it came out, it was just the English, just came out in separate volumes in the English, and then somebody took the time to cut and paste them next, the pages next to uh, the Daf Gemara.
On Safaria, they have got some older translation, which I don't remember which it
So
is.
maybe that's the older translation that I'm talking about. You mean for the Talmud, for the Gemara?
Ken, Gemara,
Yeah.
Ken.
Yeah, so maybe that's the one. I know that they have Steinsaltz. They have the Steinsaltz translation, which is very new. But in any event, I didn't have access to it, even in the reduced price uh, volumes. And I actually made uh, I didn't want to use a translation. I made a promise to myself that I would not rely on translation. And so I looked up every word as I was going in Jastro. Over my years, I was in yeshiva for 3 years. I think I had to get it. Back then, I had to get a second Jastro. I wore out one, and then I got another one, and the one that I have now is my third one.
But you
I
have to
used them.
learn the grammar. They have to learn the Aramaic grammar, which is different from the Hebrew grammar.
So the
If not,
grammar is
you can't understand it, even if you know the words. If you don't know the grammar,
no. You could. I picked up a lot of the grammar from doing the Targum every week on the Torah. I did Shnai Mikra Echad Targum. So I learned a lot of both the vocabulary and the grammar just from that. Uh, I used the Targum in the
is it the
opposite
same?
way.
Is it the
It's
same?
it's
The same Aramaic?
it's not the same Aramaic, but it's very
Oh,
similar. That's very close.
mm,
Biblical Aramaic is a little bit more removed.
mm,
Both both in vocabulary and in grammar. And also, I may have mentioned there was a volume. There was like a small book, paperback, very thin book that was produced. It was designed for Israeli students studying Gemara in high school. It was called Ashnav HaTalmud by Ayin Sadi Melamed. I also went through like 3 copies of that. I used that. I relied heavily on that. And unfortunately, I can't. I'll describe it. I'll describe what it is to you. If anyone ever finds a copy of it, please buy it, and I'll buy it from you, or let me know. It's out of print, and it's too bad. It was really one of the best aids to learning Gemara that I ever had. And there, it has a glossary of terms. So most of it is a glossary of terms. So a lot of the terms that I explained to you in Gemara, like Tanya. Tanya means, that we learn in a Braita. So, he'll explain the way those terms are used. It's all in Hebrew. He translates it into Hebrew. And then there's supplements in the back. And one of the supplements is an introduction to Aramaic grammar, which I also used. And it had other helpful things in the back. It was really an excellent little volume, which unfortunately I can't find. I can't even find some PDF copy of it online. I haven't been able to find it. Maybe somebody's posted it in the last year or two, but every once in a while I look for it, and I haven't been able to find it. But if I do, I'll let you know. It's really that was very, very good. That was excellent. And the person who did it, Ayin Sadi Melamed, was actually a big Talmid Chacham and also an academic. He and Hanoch Albeck were contemporaries. Albeck became famous for his Perush on the Mishnah. He wrote a modern Perush to the Mishnah, which is still available in 6 volumes. And then there's a 7th volume, which is his introduction to the Perush on the Mishnah, or the introduction to the Mishnah. And it's an introduction to Torah Shabbal Peh. And there's a 7th volume, which is a little bit thinner. It was done by the person who did the Nikud for the Mishnah. It was an introduction to how he did the Nikud to the Mishnah, which is also quite interesting. So for learning Mishnah, anybody who's learning Mishnah, I do recommend it. It's an excellent thing. You used to be able, it could be you still can, it used to be you could buy it at the university bookstore because it was originally designed to be, to be used in a university setting. Albeck and Melamed, these were people who came from a very traditional background, but they had academic background, and they did very important academic work. Ayin Sadi Melamed, what's available now on the Daf Yomi website, which if you're interested, you can go to the Daf Yomi. I think it's the Daf Yomi portal Daf Yomi. If you look up Daf Yomi, you'll get to the website. It has a lot of supplementary material, and I'm pretty sure that they have Melamed's dictionary. He wrote a full dictionary for the Gemara, and it's different than the Jastro. It was translated into English, but he originally wrote it from Aramaic to Hebrew. But what's different about it that makes it extremely useful is you look up words by the daf that they appear on. You can find them by the daf. It doesn't work like a regular dictionary. It's really like it translates the Aramaic terms on any given daf. and that's also quite a good thing, which we didn't have back in the day. But anyway, so those are my uh, helpful hints. By the way, in terms of Jastro now, just so you know, for a long time I was using this website that had Jastro on it. It was a Christian website, and it was one of their supplementary pages. They had posted Jastro, but now first of all, that website died. They removed it, but there's a better Jastro website. If you want anybody, I'll send you to it, and it's really a phenomenal website. It's on the Lahav website. They have Jastro at your fingertips. One second, I'll share the. This isn't the main topic of discussion today, but since we're talking about it, I think it's an important thing. This is it. Go to lahavlearning.com/Jastro. And here it says, this is a fully searchable online version of Marcus Jastro's classic and indispensable dictionary of the Talmud. And the search algorithm was written by one of our very own students, Noah Mermelstein, Shalheven High School class of 2018. So the way this works, it's really something. All you do, if you get to the website, one second, let me see if I can make this bigger. Take any given word and type it in. Let's look up, I don't know, Tani. And it just comes to that page. You just type, you don't even have to push enter. You just type the word in and it's on that page. So here we got to Tani, which is the heading here, but it'll also find words that are within the page. And in this case, you really should start from the page before. But in any event, anybody who's interested, if you don't want to go out and buy a Jastro, this is quite an excellent. It's really an excellent resource, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody's written a better dictionary than Jastro. I know it's also on Safari, yeah, and I think they also have a search thing, but I don't use Safari enough to know enough to tell you. But I use this. This is quite good. And
Shell,
yeah,
there is something which is called Frank. And well, I should have learned it, but I didn't. I was not. Grammar for Gemara and Targum, Onkelos, an introduction to Aramaic by Yitzhak Frank. It's
oh wow,
on the Google Books.
uh-huh. Oh, okay.
I got this somewhere, don't remember. And I thought I would study it, but I didn't. I didn't do it. It's too hard for me. I think the whole book is there, Talmudic syntax. I'll try something which is far away, because on Google Books, sometimes they only have the beginning. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they only have samples of the pages.
Sometimes I don't. Is this the whole book? I don't know. Ah, no, it's only the three first chapters.
Well, that's not bad. I'll
No,
be honest with
maybe
you.
it's not enough.
To be honest with you, I have never spent a lot of time studying grammar in any language, it's just also, it's not something that's easy for me to sink my mind into. There's also, I have two classical Hebrew grammar books. I have the Ibn Janach's grammar book, which is Sefer HaRikmah, and the Radak's grammar book, which is Sefer HaMichlol. Um, I've done a number of chapters in the Radak. The Radak's grammar book, by the way, is based on the grammar that he learned from his older brother, who was also a Parshan and a grammarian, and it serves as the basis for what you think of as Hebrew grammar. His approach to Hebrew grammar is the one that became widely adopted, and it's a little bit different than Ibn Janach's, which was earlier. But in terms of the Aramaic grammar, like I say, I've only learned it. I learned it from that little supplement in the back of the book I mentioned, Ashnava Talmud, and also just from learning. In other words, you can also learn grammar the way you learn, the way you learn any language. That if you learn it in real time, like when you were growing up, and I guess your first language, Paul, was French. Nobody taught you grammar when you were 3 years old. You just learned the language.
Yes, but afterwards at school we did learn the grammar.
Right, and
Yes.
that's
And
also
no, we did learn grammar of French. The only grammar I never learned, and I think it's too complicated. But I just didn't go to the shiurim. That was the German grammar. I never studied it. I just couldn't do it. I just didn't go to the.
So I'll just say one more thing about grammar in general, which I think is an important point to make, which maybe everybody understands. But
look, I see the grammar for this book of Yitzhak Frank. You can purchase it on Amazon. It's $15.
Okay,
Somebody is interested.
that might be worthwhile. I'll just say one more thing about grammar, and then we'll begin. I think what's important to remember about any books of grammar books are de facto descriptions of a language, right? In other words, nobody started a language by first writing a grammar book and a vocabulary book and then getting people to put them together.
Yeah,
like if you're,
that's the reason there are so many exceptions. In German, there are more exceptions than rules, so it's almost impossible.
I studied a little bit of German, so I know what you mean. And it's just, I say that because it's important for people to understand that I've seen this happen when for many Israelis that I've met for whom Hebrew is their first language, who maybe don't have a background in classical Hebrew, they will either not understand or they will think that earlier forms of Hebrew are wrong because the grammar isn't the same. And actually, I'll give you a little drasha example that this is not quite the same. But I remember a friend of mine a long time ago pointed out to me in the Graz Perush on the Haggadah. So he has a Perush on Manishtana Halayla Hazeh. And he talks about in the Perush, I'm not going to be able to quote the Perush, but the theme of the Perush there is to talk about why it's Laila Hazeh, not Laila Hazot, because Laila has a feminine ending, right? It has a feminine aspect. And so he talks about that. So my friend said, and he says, well, what is it? What does he mean? Laila is Zachar. It's we say Hazeh. That's the way it is. And I said to him that you say that because you learned rules of grammar, and the rules of grammar tell you that there's certain exceptions, like Laila, which has a feminine ending, we consider to be Zachar. But the Gra is digging deeper, and he's trying to understand why that is. It's not that he's making a mistake in the grammar, and that's something that you have to always be open to, especially when you're learning biblical Hebrew, which is not a single Hebrew either, right? Because it also spans many centuries, and any kind of classical text. In it, and now in modern Hebrew, it's different because there are rules that have been laid down by the academia, right? About how they made certain decisions in order to make a more uniform language that would be easier for people, to access. But they're making decisions based on different options that, existed throughout centuries and centuries of history, really millennia of history. So that's also true to bring it back to Gemara. The Gemara that we do, the text that we're using is the Vilna Shas text, and that became the most commonly used text for a number of reasons. And one of them was that at the time of the publication, the Vilna press was owned by the Ram family, and they spent quite a lot of money and time and effort to publish what they considered to be at that time the most accurate text. And they hired rabbi, scholars of the text to make sure that they could get the most accurate text possible. As we see, there are variations on those texts. So they didn't try to publish a lot of the variations, but they did sink a lot of effort into giving the text, getting the text down. But it's not the only text. And the reason I mention in the context of grammar is because when you look at variant manuscripts, sometimes the differences are really grammatical differences. Sometimes, there are whole sections that are either there, that are either missing in the Vilna Shas or that were added into the Vilna Shas. That's another whole level. But in any event, Gemara grammar, the Aramaic for the Gemara is for the Gemara is a particular kind of Aramaic. There's a dictionary. There was another dictionary that was published. It must be now like 15 or more years ago. And I don't remember who published it, and it was too expensive for me to buy, but it was like an updated version of that specific era of Aramaic. But I think, yeah, it was just too expensive for me to get. And I'll leave you with maybe two other things. So the classical dictionary for the Gemara, let's say the earliest dictionary for the Gemara is the Aruch, which is from the 10th century, and it is on the Al HaTorah website here. If you go to I'd say this is the Gemara we're learning, and on this page I can choose which perush I want to see, and one of them is Ha'aruch al Seder Hashas. And here it will, so it won't translate every single word, but it will give you the words that are specific, that are exceptional for that page. And this is this version of the Aruch is extremely helpful. If you get a standard Aruch, one of the problems with using the standard Aruch is that his girsa was often different than the Gemara, the girsa that we have. And so it's very hard sometimes to find the word that you're looking for because you may have had a different girsa in the word. But anyway, that's the Aruch. This is a very important early dictionary. And then in the 19th century, there was an update, as it were, an updated version called the Aruch HaShalem, which you can download most of the volumes to. The Aruch is a single thick volume, but the Aruch HaShalem is like several volumes like that. And it goes into a lot more detail, and it was done, at a later time when there was more. The person who did it, his name was Kohat, He had also much wider background in Semitic languages, and it goes into a lot more detail. So occasionally I'll look into that. Anyway, those are some those are some of the things that you can use. But just to get back to, basic learning and what we're trying to do, we're just trying to make a basically we're just trying to make a reading in the Gemara. So sometimes it seems like we're going into a great deal of depth, but mostly what I'm really trying to do is just make it so that I can read and understand the flow of the Gemara. And I'm relying on the text as it appears for us to do that. And yes, I think I've spoken enough about that. Let's get started now that it's quite late already. Maybe I'll leave some of that in for Michael Schwartz. But let's begin our studies now and daven that the zchut of our learning should help to finally bring home all of the hostages and protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael and all of the innocents and bring a speedy end to our wars and be an Ilui Neshama for my mother, Shlomo Leah Bat Menachem Mendel V'Rachel. And with that, we're going to resume our sugya. So, Michael Werner, you can tell us what was the Mishnah speaking about that we're now talking about in the sugya here? What's the relevant part of the Mishnah? You said you went back to the Mishnah. Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted, Michael.
So I went back to the Mishnah and I just started mapping out the Mishnah, but I did not get up to where we were last week. And so honestly, I need to go.
No, I understand. So that's okay. So what's the Mishnah talking about?
The basic question of the Mishnah is, what specific actions fall under the rubric of pekuach nefesh? And the Mishnah addressed that question by looking at various specific situations in which pekuach nefesh overrides, which otherwise overrides other prohibitions, such as eating tamei foods or malachan Shabbat.
Okay, so this is our Mishnah, and it starts off with the case of somebody who was stricken by bulmus, and we talked a lot about that. And one of the things, then it talks about Mishna Shachokel Shoteh, and this is also right a life-threatening situation. Someone's bitten by a rabid dog, and the Tanakama says, "Ein machilin oto michatzer kaved shelo." Right, we all know about that. And Rabbi Mati ben Charash matir. So he's matir to give the chatzer kaved of a kelev shoteh to the person who was bitten by the kelev shoteh. And then, while we're talking about Rabbi Mati ben Charash in this context of giving a life-saving remedy, or what could be a life-saving remedy to somebody, he also said, "Hachoshesh bigrono metilin lo sam b'toch pi b'Shabbat mibnei shu safek nefashot. L'kol safek nefashot tochad et haShabbat." And that's where we get this from. So the sugya that we're doing now is dealing with things that Rabbi Matya ben Charash said. So I see from the Mishnah that Rabbi Matya ben Charash was makil in these particular remedies. In the Mishnah, he's makil to give chatzer kaved to someone who's bitten by a rabid dog, and that would be any day of the week, any day of the year, right? Because the heter there is that you're eating something that isn't kosher. But in order to save your life, he said that you can do that. And then the other thing is specifically that he said you can take some. You can put some, some kind of a drug into, or an herbal remedy or whatever the some was. You can put it in your mouth on Shabbat. If you're choshesh begaron, that's the girsa in the Mishnah. If you're choshesh if you have some kind of an illness or sensitivity in your throat, you can put the sam in your mouth on Shabbat because that's also safek kedusha. So now our Gemara, the sugya that we're doing, just to go back a little bit, it really starts with this story of Rabbi Yochanan, right? The Rabbi Yochanan, who had safidna, which we understand to be scurvy. Right? It goes back a little bit earlier than this. We don't have to go all the way. We don't have to read all the way back, but we know that right. It starts from here. Rabbi Yochanan chash b'tzafidna. That he came down with tzafidna, and then he went to this matronita who gave him a remedy, and so on and so on and so forth. So we're going to skip all of that part there, and we come back to this now. And says Rabbi Yochanan, when he came down with tzafidna, avad hachi b'shabta v'itasi. This is what he did on Shabbos, and then he was cured. Rabbi Yochanan hechi avid hachi. So Rabbi Yochanan, how did he do such a thing? Amar of Nachum bar Yitzchak shani tzafidna hu matchil b'peh v'gomer b'vnei me'ayim. In other words, how did Rabbi Yochanan take a remedy on Shabbos? You're not allowed to take remedies on Shabbos unless it would be sakanat nefashot. And the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains that, but safidna is different because it begins in your mouth and it ends up in your intestines. And as I mentioned, I think last time, it's the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, which maybe we should have looked at, but it's okay. You'll just take my word for it. That talks about this idea that any kind of an internal malady is considered to be sakana, and most things that are external to the body are not necessarily considered to be sakana, not as a rule, but in general. And then the mouth is this sort of intermediate area, right? Is your mouth inside you or outside you? And so there's an argument to be made that if it's just in your mouth, then maybe that's not. If the illness is just in your mouth, that's not a sakana for which you would be allowed to take a remedy on Shabbos. But the Gemara is saying here that safidna is different because it starts in your mouth, but it ends up internally. So you're allowed to treat it on Shabbos even before it gets to the stage where it would actually be dangerous, because it's considered, in other words, so you see from that it's, once you diagnose the illness and that you know that even right now the symptoms are you're at a stage where you're not in immediate danger, but if you don't treat it, it will become dangerous. So it's telling you that you can treat that kind of an illness on Shabbos. And the Gemara is going to talk more about this later. We haven't gotten to that part of the sugya yet, but this is one of the places we get this concept from. So the part that we're going to do today is we're going to go over what we did last week and then finish, God willing. But I think it's worth going back over some of the things we did last week to keep it all in line. So it starts from here. And Michael Werner, why don't you start to read? 1 second, I'm going to make it bigger. From here, Amarle.
Amarle Rav Achia bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan. Kemaim. Kerabi Mati ben Charash. Okay, there we go. De Amar Hahoshesh Befiv Matilin Lo Sam Beshabbat. Amarle. שאני אומר בזו, אבל לא באחרת. So Rav here ben Arba said to Rabbi Yochanan, how's this so?
No, Kiman is like whom,
Like whom? Oh, Kevman. Okay, right.
right?
Kevman.
Like whom.
Like whom?
And what does he mean by that question? What's he asking him?
So he's asking, I guess I'd have to go back and look at what came right before that.
No, not really. You can get it just from here. Kiman, like whom? In other words, well, okay, we did it. I see what you're saying. We did enough just before this. What do we know about Rabbi Yochanan and what he did on Shabbos? What do we know?
He took a remedy for sphina, for scurvy.
Right. So he took this remedy for tzfitna on Shabbos. So
And
now
so,
Rav Chia bar Abba is saying to Rabbi Yochanan, Kiman, like whom? What is he asking?
like, whose opinion you're going by?
Very good. He's saying, in other words, whose opinion are you relying upon to take a remedy for tzfitna on Shabbos? And Rav Chia bar Abba proceeds to try to answer his own question. And he says, Rabbi Matya ben Charash. What did Rabbi Matya ben Charash say? Go ahead. Damar.
Somebody who is stricken in his mouth, or yes, we place a drug in his mouth on Shabbat.
Okay, so why would Rav Chia bar Abba think that this is the? So this is, by the way, okay. So this is Rav Matya ben Charash from our Mishnah with one slight change, because here it says a choshesh befiv, and the gears in our Mishnah is a choshesh bigrono. Okay, but we're assuming that for our purposes right now that's the same. Okay, so he's saying it looks to me like you're going like Rabbi Matya ben Charash. So why would he say that? Why is Rabbi Matya ben Charash the logical answer to his question?
Because he thinks that there's something going on in the mouth is a case of sakanata nefashot.
And therefore what? That's correct. And therefore what?
So therefore, placing the drug in the mouth is pikuach nefesh, and therefore it overrides the prohibition of malacha on Shabbat.
Very good. There is right. So it overrides the gzeira against taking drugs on Shabbat, which is ultimately connected to the chashash that you might do a malacha of grinding up herbs. Amarle, so he said to him that I say about this one and not another one. So who said to whom?
I'm guessing that
You don't have to guess. There are only two people here.
This is Rabbi Yochanan replying to Rav Chia bar Abba.
Very good. So Rabbi Yochanan says to him that I say about this and not about another one. So what do we think that means? What is Rabbi Yochanan saying back to him?
So I can think of two possible readings. One is that he's saying this applies to the case of sphitna, but to no other case of a sickness in the mouth. Or he could be saying this applies to this particular opinion of Rav Chia ben Charash.
Reb Matya ben Charash, yeah.
Matya ben Charash, but not the other opinion, which I don't recall offhand.
So here, okay, so but that's okay. So we're going to go with your second reading, which is the more immediate reading. It's the more immediate context. In other words, why do I say that? Rav Chia bar Abba asked him, "Who are you going like?" And he's offering that maybe you're going like Rabbi Matya ben Charash. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I say about this one. In other words, I say about this psak of Rabbi Matya ben Charash, but not about another psak of Rabbi Matya ben Charash. So now in the Mishnah, we had two Piskei Dinim of Rabbi Matya ben Charash. What were they? You just read them 3 minutes ago.
One is that if somebody has sickness in his throat, then we place a drug in his mouth
On Shabbos.
on Shabbos.
Yeah, and
My poor brain.
it's okay.
This is
And
my
the other one, Paul,
my limited attention span.
Paul, what's the other? What's the other issue that we were talking about that Rabbi Mati ben Harash was matir? Right, the Kelev
There were
Shoteh.
four. There were four of them.
No, wait.
Mm.
No, wait. You're skipping ahead. This is how I structured this shir today. We went back, we looked at the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, and I said this explicitly, Rabbi Mati ben Harash gives us two Piskei Dinim. One of them is that you can eat that you're machilin chatzer kaved of the Kelev Shoteh to the person who's bit by the Kelev Shoteh. That was his heter. And the second one was the Choshesh B'Grono, which is now a Choshesh B'Viv. So we have those two Piskei Dinim. So when Rabbi Yochanan says back to Rav Chia, Shani Omer Bezu v'lo ba'acheret, at this moment I might think that he means, yes, I hold like Rabbi Maki ben Harash about the case of a Choshesh B'Fiv. But not
only that one, and not the the dog, not the Kelev Shoteh.
Right. So that exactly. So that would be the simple understanding of what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. He says, yeah, I hold like him for this, but not for the other thing, not for Kelev Shoteh. So then, Paul, read the next part. Lema Messiah le.
Lema Messiah le. מי שאחזו ירקון, מאכילין אותו בשר חמור, מי שנשכו כלב שוטה, מאכילין אותו מחצר כבד שלו.
And keep going.
והחושש בפיו, מטילים לא שם בשבת, דברי רבי מתיה בן חרש. החכמים אומרים, באלו אין בהם משום רפואה, באלו למעוטי מי לא,
My love. My love.
למעוטי סם, למעוטי מקיזין דם, לסחונכי.
Right. Okay. So, Lema Messiah le, what does that mean?
Who says that?
This is the Stam Gemara now. This is the Gemara following up on this discussion between Rabbi Chia bar Abba and Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan said, Shani Omer Bezu v'lo ba'acheret. And now the Gemara says, Lema Messiah le. What is Lema?
What is he referring to?
No.
No, that's a good guess. In context, I shouldn't be guessing, but
Well, this root we have in Hebrew, right? Siyua, the Sayea. What's that mean? I'm sure that Paul knows.
To help.
To help. Lema means, let us say, Messiah le. Let's say this is a help to him. Let's say this helps him. So the Gemara brings Lema Messiah le. This is also a standard phrase in the Gemara. And what the Gemara is saying is, we have here statement, or what's effectively a statement from Rabbi Yochanan, from an Amora. So let's say that I can bring a source for him. I can bring a source that will aid him. In other words, it will support his contention from a Tana. So let's say this Braita, in this case, it's usually a Braita. In this case, I have a Braita that the Gemara says will support Rabbi Yochanan. So what's Rabbi Yochanan's contention? The way we understand it now is that he holds that we should paskin like Rabbi Matya ben Charash regarding Choshesh Befiv, but not
only for the Sam Shabbat.
right. Only Sam b'Shabbat, and not for anything else. So now I'm going to bring a Braita that I want to use to support Rabbi Yochanan. I should also tell you that, so that's the way to understand Lema Messiah, but also usually, wait, I skipped a little here. Usually when the Gemara says Lema or Nema, let us say, that's almost always brought to set up a possible answer or a possible support. That's the word. It's to set up what could be a possible support, but it's going to be rejected. Lema, let's say, that's always the structure. Lema means let's say X, and then we'll say no, we reject that. It's not going to be a support.
So if we're going to sort of translate even more, say, let us say for the sake of argument that.
You might say that. I understand why you're saying that, but don't translate it that way.
Okay.
Okay, no, like never translate that way, because there are other hashlachot, there are other implications there that may make it more difficult. But it's not wrong to think of it that way. But it's not just for the sake of argument. That's what I mean. I'm not sure it's the best way to do it. But okay, let's say that this is going to support Rabbi Yochanan. So what did we learn in this Braita? Mishachazo Yerakon, somebody who's been stricken by Yerakon, which we understand to be jaundice. So what's the cure for him? Basar Chamor. That's one case. Second case is Mishin Shachokev Shotem Machinato Mechatzer Kaved Shalom. And then the third case is a Choshesh Befiv, Natilin Osam B'Shabbat. And all three of these cases are heterim from Rabbi Matya ben Charash. What do the Chachamim say, Paul?
החכמים אומרים, אלו אין בהם משום רפואה.
Stop. That's the end of the Chachamim. That's the end. That's why I changed the font. That's the end of the Braita.
Those are the Elu, but afterwards they ask and says, what is this Elu?
Okay, so we'll talk about the Gemara in a second. But what do we understand from the Chachamim? Before we get to the Gemara's interpretation, what do we understand from the Chachamim? What do they say about these three cases?
They don't believe that those are medications which help.
And therefore what?
Therefore you should not be allowed to use them if they don't help.
Right, you can't use them. So in the case of the Basar Chamur and the Chatzer Kaved of the Kerev Shoteh, so those will never be allowed. In other words, if that's what the Chachamim are referring to, those will never be allowed because they're treif, right? So they're saying there's not a heter to eat them, even if you think it's a refuah for these particular illnesses. And if they're talking about the Sam b'Shabbat, it means that you could take the Sam, but not on Shabbat, because the Sam itself is not asur as far as we know. But you would not be allowed to take it on Shabbat. But as you say, the Gemara stops essentially on this word be'elu. What do they say? Be'elu l'ma'ute mai. What is the Gemara asking here?
To which be'elu refers to.
Well, what's l'ma'ute?
Does it refer to all of them or only to some of them? To some of them.
Okay, so just to be more particular about the word, Lima'ute comes from the word ma'at. Lima'et means to make, right, to limit. And in this, it means to include, to exclude. All right. Be'elu, what is that excluding? So what's their question?
Yes.
What's the Gemara's question? What does the Gemara mean by that? Be'elu lemute mai.
So I can think of sort of
No,
two.
that these medications don't help. But there are three cases there. Is it true
Okay.
for all the three of them, or only for some of them, only of two of them, one of them? Or so?
Okay. So be'elu means, so we have three. Elu is a plural. These, right? With these, they do not constitute a refuah. That's what the Chachamim say. These do not constitute a refuah, and therefore there's not going to be a heter to use them. So the Gemara said,
but maybe it's they don't. Maybe it's not for all of them. Maybe it's only for some of them.
and that's the Gemara's point. The Gemara,
Yes.
that's exactly what this question. Be'elu implies that these are not allowed, but one of them will be allowed. Why do I say one? Because there are three. There are three remedies that Rabbi Mati ben Charash is matir. Chachamim say these are not allowed. I'm just making the language a little easier. These are not allowed.
At least two are not allowed.
So it means at least two are not allowed. So if that's true, so the Gemara is saying be'elu lemute mai. So these, what does that exclude? Which of the three does it exclude? My love lemute sam. Why not? In other words, why not say that it's to exclude sam, which is the right mitzilin lo sam befeh b'Shabbat? So let's stop there before we get to the rejection. Why would I want it to be that? In other words, so again, we have three. We have Yerakon, right? So we'll just say in terms of the remedies, you have Basar Chamur, Chatzer Kaved, and Sam B'Shabbat. So Be'elu Ein Vehem Yishum Refuah. So why don't I say that the Chachamim are saying these that are not a Refuah are the first two, the Basar Chamur and the Chatzer Kaved, and that would leave what? The Sam. So why not say that that Elu excludes Sam? It excludes the case of Sam, where what? The Chachamim would agree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash that that's mutar. Now, why does the Gemara want to learn the Braita in that way? Why is that what they wanted to say?
Because if it's excluded from the statement that you ain by hem mishum rufuah, then it saves life, therefore qualifies as pekuach nefesh. Therefore, Rabbi Matya ben Charash's statement therefore, there's a basis for Rabbi Yochanan holding by Rabbi Matya ben Charash's statement in that case and not in others, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan acted properly or acted properly, So anyway.
Okay. You got to the main point. Very good. And you even went through all the steps. So I'm impressed. In other words, just to put it just a little more succinctly, what was the point of bringing the Braita? Lema Messiah. Let's say this Braita comes to support Rabbi Yochanan. And what do I mean it supports Rabbi Yochanan? It means it supports Rabbi Yochanan in his decision that to hold like Rabbi Matya ben Charash regarding Sam Befiv b'Shabbat, but not about anything else that Rabbi Matya ben Charash said. And so now I bring a Braita where I see that the Chachamim would the way the Gemara wants to learn the Braita is the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash that HaChoshesh B'fiv Mitzilin Lo Sam B'Shabbat, and they reject the other things that Rabbi Matya ben Harash said. So that's how the Braita would be a siyua, right? It would be a help, it would be a support for Rabbi Yochanan, who's saying that's what Rabbi Yochanan seems to be saying. So my love the mutesam. So why don't I say that when the Chachamim said be'elu ein behem mishum refuah, they meant to say that the first two, the Yerakon and the Kerev Shoteh, those remedies are not allowed. We don't agree. But by default, it means that they do agree with Rabbi Mati ben Harash that Mitzilin Stam b'Shabbat. So the Gemara says, so Paul, now read this last line, Lo lemute.
לא למותי מקיזין דם לסחודכם.
So what do
This
they?
is
So first explain what the words mean. What does it mean?
no,
Yeah, so lo, right? No, and there's I'm
No.
not going.
so, some of them.
Well, limaute is to exclude.
To exclude
Oh,
that you, I don't know, like
it excludes bleeding him.
But it's right. It's mikizin dam in English. We call it bloodletting.
blood,
Blood letting.
letting,
Letting. Letting.
letting.
Or we simply say bleeding. Bleeding.
Yeah, but I think
it means the same thing.
Yeah, except bleeding is, I think, is less clear because it could also
Right.
Yeah, so we call it bloodletting. So it's to exclude bloodletting for stronchi. It doesn't matter at this moment what stronchi is. We saw Rashi said it's either diphtheria or it's anthrax. It's something else, but bloodletting was a common was used in two ways in at least in the time of the Gemara. There was a notion of doing regular bloodletting, that once a month you did bloodletting, as it were, whether you needed it or not. It was like for good health maintenance, you do bloodletting. And then in addition, you might do bloodletting for specific diseases. And that's what it's talking about here. The mute mikizin dam lisronching. This is to exclude bloodletting for stronchi. So what's for so again?
But this is not mentioned. It's not among
it's not
the
right.
The three which are discussed there. The three heterim you have there. There's something else outside.
It's something outside. Okay, and the Gemara is going to talk about that in a moment. So at this moment though, so let's just understand. So what the Gemara is concluding at this moment is that the Gemara, you wanted to bring this Braita, Lema Messiah, we want to bring this Braita to support Rabbi Yochanan, who held like Rabbi Matya ben Harash that Mitzilin lo sam b'Shabbat, but he rejected Rabbi Matya ben Harash regarding these other things, regarding Yerakon and Kelev Shoteh. You wanted to say that's how I should read the Braita, and I'll say no. I'll say that when the Chachamim said be'elu ein behem mishum refuah, what they really meant was all three of these things of Rabbi Matya ben Harash. But like we said, be'elu indicates that I'm saying these and not something else. So what's the something else? The something else is mikizin dam lisronche, which, as Paul points out, Nobody mentioned that so far. So it's something that the Gemara knows about that we don't yet know about. But and we'll talk about it in a second. But at this moment, what would it mean? It means that this Breita that you brought to support Rabbi Yochanan
We
doesn't
don't
work as
accept any of them. We don't accept any of them.
we don't accept any of them.
But,
So it's
it
not a
could be that
support for
there is an exception, but the exception doesn't belong to those three ones.
That's
It's
right.
another one.
It's another way. And so therefore it doesn't support Rabbi Yochanan, right? And it all goes back to this question that Rabbi Chia bar Abba asked Rabbi Yochanan, who do you hold like? And don't you hold like Rabbi Matya ben Harash? And Rabbi Yochanan said, about this one, in other words, about Metilin Sam Shabbat, I do hold like him, but not by another one. So I wanted this Braita to read that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash about Metilin Sam Shabbat. Why would I want that? Because if the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash, then obviously that's the halacha. And it's not that Rabbi Yochanan would be holding like a dat yachid, like a singular opinion of Rabbi Matya ben Harash. He's holding like the Chachamim, who also hold the Metilin Sam b'Shabbat. But the Gemara says, no, you can't bring a proof from this Braita, because this Braita doesn't prove absolutely that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash about Metilin Sam b'Shabbat. It doesn't prove that. Because I could say, when they said Be'elain vehem mishum refuah, it meant none of these three things we agree with. And we only agree with him about being Mikiz Dam on Shabbat L'Strunche. So how do I get that?
Poor Rabbi Matya ben Harash.
So we get that from this next. We get this from the next Braita. So Michael Werner, you could read Hachinami.
Hachinami mistabra d'Tanya. שלושה דברים אמר רבי ישמעאל ברבי יוסי, ששמע משום רבי מתיה בן חרש. מקיזין דם מונחה בשבת, ומי שנשכו כלב שוטה מאכלין אותו מחצר כבד שלו, והחושש בפיו מטילים לו סם בשבת. והחכמים אומרים, ואלו אין בהם משום רפואה, ואילו...
Okay, so stop. So that's the end of the Braita. So first of all, Hachinami mistabra. What do the words mean? And if you don't know, you can just say, I don't know.
I'm guessing, I'm saying that the last, the verb, has the shorish meaning to argue or to contend.
No, savar means to think, or to hold.
To hold, okay.
Right? We say like a svara is a logical argument.
Okay.
Right? It's to think, right? To hold in a certain way. It has its roots in biblical Hebrew, but we won't go through the whole etymology of the word. Mistab, and also in modern Hebrew, mistaber means it to make sense.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that usage comes from the Gemara. Mistaber comes from this line in the Gemara. Hachinami. So hachi, the literal translation, hachi means, I'm going to translate into Hebrew. Hachi means kach, like so. Nami means gam, also. Mistabra is mistaber. Kach gam mistaber. This also makes sense. So, what makes sense? What the Gemara is going to say, what makes sense is what we just said a moment ago, that when the Chachamim disagreed with Rabbi Matya ben Harash, They disagreed with him about all these three things, and the one thing that they would have agreed with him about is mikizin dam lisrunche b'Shabbat. How do why? And that's going to make sense. Why? Ditanya, because I learn in a Braita, and now we'll learn the Braita. So, Michael,
This is another Baraita.
this is another Braita. It's a separate Braita. So, Michael, tell us what the
Rabbi
Braita.
Matya was a Tana.
He was a Tana. We saw him in the Mishnah,
Yes,
right?
because
He's on the Mishnah. He's in the Braita. He was a Tana. So,
Rabbi
Michael,
Ishmael said, but Rabbi Yossi talks about him, so he has got to be.
Right. So
to know him, or maybe it's even earlier. I don't know.
Well, Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, so Michael explained. Shlosha Dvarim Rabbi Yishmael. Go ahead.
So Rabbi Yishmael, in the name of Rabbi Yossi?
No, but Rabbi Yossi means the son of Rabbi Yossi.
Oh, Bar. Okay, okay. Rabbi Yishmael of the Bar and the son of Rabbi Yossi said three things that he heard regarding
Mishum. So Mishum here would be the same as Mishem. He heard it in the name of Rabbi Matya.
Rabbi Matya ben Harash. That we bleed somebody for Seronche, whatever that is, let's say diphtheria on Shabbat. And it's somebody who has been bitten by a mad dog. We feed him from the lobe of the liver, of the dog's liver. And somebody who somebody suspects he has an illness in the mouth, or somebody's been stricken with an illness in his mouth. We feed him, we place a drug in his mouth on Shabbat. And the sages say, regarding these things, these things are just, do not cure.
Right. These things do not constitute a cure, and therefore
they don't save life. Therefore, they don't qualify as pekuach nefesh. Therefore, they do not override Shabbat.
They don't override Shabbat,
or they don't override the prohibition of malacha on Shabbat.
They don't override Shabbat, and they don't override eating davar asur, right? Like chatzer kaved is a davar asur. Paul, what were you saying?
They replace the basar chamor with the mekizim dam l'schonche.
As it were. In other words, that right,
yes.
right. In other words, right. Each of the Braitot has three things. Altogether, they're talking about four things.
Four,
right? So
yes, but they're not the same three.
But right, so they're not the same three. But what's the mechaneh mishutaf here? For our purpose,
dam, yes.
So,
this is the one.
Well, Mishnah, the one that what's the one we're concerned about? We're concerned about a choshesh
Shabbat,
right? Because we're still trying to find out what the Tannaitic basis was for Rabbi Yochanan's psak that you can treat Sfidna on Shabbat by putting a remedy in your mouth. So now I have this Braita. This Braita also has three things. So it has Mekizin Dam, the Sunche b'Shabbat. It has the Kelev Shoteh. It has the Choshesh B'Fiv and the Sam b'Shabbat. It has those three things. Chachamim say these don't constitute a refuah. Meaning, as Michael explained, since they don't constitute a refuah, they're asur. But now we have the same question. Be'elu means these.
What are these elu?
What are the elu? What does that refer to? So it means there are at least two things here that don't constitute a refuah, but one of them does constitute a refuah. So now we go through the same. We go through the same thing. So Michael, be'elu.
Be'elu, what is this? What is it? Be'elu le motei my love.
So what's the mutei mai mean?
What does this exclude?
right? So what does Be'elu exclude? Go ahead.
My love, atarte, but but reta, ul mote deresha. La atarte deresha kayamata ul mote desefa.
Okay, so Be'elu mutemai. What does Be'elu exclude? My love, atarte batraita. Why not? Do you know what this means? Tarte means what?
I don't
Oh,
know.
what does tarte mean? Do you know?
That
Tarte
it's two.
mashma.
Tarte
It's two.
mashma. It's in the two.
It's
In
two.
the two
Tarte
sense.
mean
Yeah.
right. So is a prefix in Aramaic, which is the same as al, ayin lamed in Hebrew. So my love al shnaim batraita. Batraita are the last
So
ones, right? You know, you have Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, and Baba Batra. So,
Batra. Yeah.
right? So
Last one.
Baba means Sha'ar, right? Baba Kama means the first Sha'ar, the first gate. Baba Mitzia is the middle gate. And Baba Batra is the last gate. But Batra is last. So my love atarte batraita. Why not on the two last ones? In other words, what are the two last ones? Kerev Shotin and Sam B'Shabbat, and not Srunche. Right? Srunche is the first one. So we understand again that Elu has to exclude two. So the Gemara says, why don't we say that the two that the Chachamim are saying are not Rifua, those are the two last ones, the Chatzer Kaved and the Sam B'Shabbat. My love atarti batraita, the lamute duresha. And then, Michael, lamute duresha, what does that mean?
This is excluding the two former ones, the first two.
No, what does resha mean? What
The
is
top.
resha?
The first, the
The
top.
first. So why don't we say Elu excludes the two last ones? I'm sorry, Elu includes the two last ones, and it excludes what?
The last
The
one, the
resha.
first one, the first one.
The first one, right? The resha. So what's the resha? That's v'kizin dam lisrunche. Why does the Gemara want to learn the Breita in that way? Why is that the Gemara's tendency, its first inclination to learn the Gemara, to learn the Breita that way? What question were we trying to address?
What is the Tanaitic? I mean, what is the Tanaitic warrant for Rabbi Yochanan taking a psalm in his mouth on Shabbat?
Okay, so that's the general issue that we're trying to address. And what happened? We wanted to address that, and we wanted to say that he holds like Rabbi Matya ben Harash. We brought a Breita where there's a machloka between Rabbi Matya ben Harash and the Chachamim, and we wanted to learn that first Breita to say that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash about Sam b'Shabbat, and then the Gemara rejected that, and they said, no, the way we learn that Breita is Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash even about Sam b'Shabbat, and they only agree with him about B'kizin dam l'sronche. So now I bring the second Breita, and wanted to say that makes sense because I have a Breita that would seem to support that position that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Matya ben Harash about Mekizin dam l'stronchi b'Shabbat, and that's what you just explained now, Michael. My love atarte batraita. Why don't I say the Chachamim disagree with this statement in the name of Rabbi Matya ben Harash regarding Kelev Shoteh and Stam B'Shabbat. And but it excludes, in other words, meaning they would agree with him about the Reisha, which is Mikizin Dam L'Sunche B'Shabbat. So this Breitza would then support the contention that we just had, which is that there's a Breita that would support the idea that these Chachamim in the first Breita disagree with Rabbi Mati ben Charash about all the three things in the first Breita, because they agree with him about one other thing, and that's Mikizin Dam L'Sunche B'Shabbat. So that's the my love atarte batraite ilmute deresha. Why don't I say that? And then that would support what we just contended a moment ago. And then Michael, now lo.
Lo. Atarte deresha kayamata ul mote the sefer.
So now,
so
go
this,
ahead.
This includes the first one.
Wait, so let's go. What does the mean?
This like the Hebrew, like El in contemporary Hebrew.
Like al.
Al.
Like
Upon.
al. Okay, al. It's, in other words, be'elu. What is it referring to? Al tarte deresha. Al shnayim deresha kamaita.
So it refers to the first two items.
Okay, this is, and actually they're different gears out here, but literally means, right, the two first ones that are at the top. The two first ones that are at the head. Okay. And what are the first two that are in the Breita?
Bleeding and lobe of the liver for Kelev Shoteh.
Okay, bloodletting and the Chatzer Kaved. Why don't I say? So I wanted to say, why does it refer to the two latter ones, which would be Kelev Shoteh and Metilin Lo Sam? And now I say no, Atarte Deresha Kamaita, which would be Mikizin Dam Mesrunche and Chatzer Kaved. It refers to those two. Ulemute de Seifa. And what does that mean?
And it excludes the last one.
And what's the last one?
Putting a drug in the mouth.
Okay, so right, very good. So now we've, in a sense, we've come full circle, because now the way the Gemara says, no, the way I have to understand this Breita is that it doesn't support the idea that Mikizin Dam L'Sunche B'Shabbat is what the Chachamim agreed with Rabbi Matya ben Charash. What it supports is the idea that the Chachamim agreed with Rabbi Matya ben Charash about Metilin Lo Sam B'Shabbat. So ultimately, I could see this as I could see this Breita now, even though this wasn't the reason I brought it, but now I could see it as a support for Rabbi Yochanan, going back to my original problem. Where is the Tanaitic support for Rabbi Yochanan? So now I could say, actually, no, the way I could learn this Breita, it would come out as a support for Rabbi Yochanan. We're gonna, I wanted to get through this, but it's okay. This was a good review. We're gonna, God willing, we'll go through the next parts next time. So right now, in a sense, it's not really entirely settled. So here, before we look at the next part of the Gemara, let's just summarize. So here's a question that we need to ask ourselves. So the Gemara brought two Breitot, and each time it says it's offering each Breita as a possible. The first one certainly is a possible support for Rabbi Yochanan, and the second one is a support for the refutation of Rabbi Yochanan. And in each case, I reject those readings. And of course, the problem, which Paul has, dwelled on, and properly so, The problem is when the Chachamim in each of those Braitot says Be'elu ein bahem mishum refuah, what is the reference? What are they talking about? What are the these that ein bahem refuah? And in each case, the Gemara says, why didn't I say it like this? And the Gemara says, no, I'll say like this. How does the Gemara know it's the second one? It doesn't bring a proof. It just says, let's say like this. And they say, no, we'll say like that. So if you understand the flow of the Gemara, in the first case, the Gemara says, why don't I say why don't I say why don't I say that it excludes the Elu means the two that the Chachamim don't agree with Basar Chamor and Kelev and Chatzer Kaveh, but they do agree with Mitilin Sam b'Shabbat. Why didn't I say that's the way to learn? They say no, it's Imute Mikizin Dam Lisrunche, which is not even in the Braita. How do they know that? We say that makes sense because I could learn it from this other Braita. I could learn that they agree with Mikizin Dam Lisrunche b'Shabbat. But I don't know exactly at the moment that the Gemara is. Wait, sorry, I don't want to lose everybody here. But the question, you see what happened in each Braita. Each time the Gemara brings a Braita, each Braita has three Piskei Din from Rebbe Matya, and in each case, I know that the Chachamim reject two out of the three. So how does the Gemara always wants to start off with one contention? They say, no, it's a different, we learn it differently. How do they know that we learn it differently? Or how do they know that I learn it the first way? In other words, the problem with each of the Braitot is there's nothing inherent in the Braita itself to tell me which way to learn it. So when the Gemara says, why didn't I say it this way? No, I'll say this way. It's not necessarily that the Gemara is saying, that the second way is the conclusion. It just means I could learn it that other way. And since I could learn it the other way, it's no longer a proof. In order for it to be a proof, in order for it to be a siyua for what I want to prove, it has to be the only way to learn it. If there's more than one way of understanding it, then it falls away. I need something else that's going to be more solid. That's what I want. That's the main message I want to get across. Nonetheless,
in the end, is there one of the statements of Rabbi Matya which survives all this?
Yes. In the end,
Hakazat Adam, maybe, or I don't know.
No. The one that's going to survive is the one that Rabbi Yochanan held by, which is Choshesh B'Fiv Mitilin Nosam B'Shabbat. Ultimately, because the truth is, it's kind of known from the beginning because we know that Rabbi Yochanan held that way. Maaseh Rav, he actually did it himself. So we're going to go through a bit of a circuitous route, and we still have a little bit more to go.
And he got it from Rabbi Matya ben Charash.
Ultimately, he gets it from Rabbi Matya ben Charash, but ultimately what we're going to show is that, what does it mean he got it from Rabbi Matya ben Charash? Because Rabbi Matya ben Charash is the one who articulates the din, but the Chachamim agreed with him. In the Rabbi Matya ben Charash's own contemporaries agreed with him. That will be the ultimate conclusion. But we haven't gotten to the ultimate conclusion. We're going to stop here. We spent a lot of time with talking about different things at the beginning of this year, but we'll stop here. And so next time we'll pick up from here from Tashema, and we'll talk about Tashema and the other. There are a couple of other sources that we still need to bring. So Adkan. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.